What do you mean by overdrawn account? As Brandon's sister yelled at him for the rent money he had given her. I looked at my phone in faux amazement and exclaimed, "That's not possible. What did he do? When?" I remained calm, giving her the impression that I was only now discovering my husband's treachery. However, my perception differed from what he initially believed. My name is Isla Thompson, and my husband, Brandon, recently made one of the worst blunders of my life. Despite my anticipation, waking up to an empty bed on Sunday morning felt like a shock. Farewell. In any case, I never loved you, Brandon. You are very sophisticated. As a forensic accountant in Milwaukee, I have been investigating financial fraud for some of the largest Midwest companies for the past 15 years. Let's just say that my own spouse wasn't exactly dealing with an amateur when he began to show symptoms of organizing his big escape 3 months ago. The first warning sign was when, after years of letting me manage everything, he suddenly became interested in our finances and began to inquire about our retirement accounts. Then there were the covert phone conversations, the mysterious absences, and the way he would switch the screen on his computer every time I entered the room. These were typical indications of someone preparing to flee. In my line of work, I had witnessed it all. Brandon was unaware that I witnessed every questionable transaction, covert purchase, and effort to transfer our funds covertly. Every action he performed in an attempt to defraud me was recorded, captured on camera, and forwarded directly to my attorney. He thought he had pulled off the ideal getaway when he left that letter. But I had previously shifted our funds, tagged our accounts, and planned for every possible scenario he would try. I couldn't help but smile as the fraud notifications began to flood my phone that Monday morning. Brandon believed he was 10 steps ahead, but he was unaware that he was putting himself in a dangerous situation. Notifications about refused transactions, unsuccessful withdrawal attempts, and blocked accounts started beeping on the phone. To me, each one sounded like melody. My palm touched the just-in-case folder on my desk, which contained months' worth of evidence that would ruin not only his escape strategy but his whole future. I nearly felt terrible for him when I heard his sister's frantic voice on the phone. Nearly. You may imagine that learning that my 8-year husband had never truly loved me crushed me. The problem with becoming a forensic accountant, however, is this: you get the ability to recognize patterns. When people conceal things, they believe they are being clever. But money leaves a trace. Always. Brandon, too? He covered everything with breadcrumbs. 6 years ago, Brandon and I met at a charity gala. He seemed to have his life together, was charming, and was successful, or so he said. He drove a fancy automobile, was a financial advisor, and they discussed creating a future together. His desire and confidence struck me. In hindsight, I should have observed how evasive he was about his history and how he consistently sidestepped inquiries about his clientele. At least I believed that the first 3 years were good. We discussed establishing a baby, planned exotic holidays, and purchased a lovely home in the Milwaukee suburbs. He would become defensive anytime I inquired about his college debts, or he would shift the topic when I brought up meeting his former coworkers. But there were always these minor details that didn't quite line up. You don't believe me? He'd turn the tables on me. You need to know everything. But why? Do you not believe that I am capable of managing my own finances? Traditional manipulation. In my line of work, I'd witnessed it numerous times. Individuals avoiding financial openness by utilizing emotional leverage. However, I chose to overlook it because I wanted to have faith in him and us. My first error was that. Then I saw the unmistakable indications. He insisted on having different accounts for our holiday expenses last Christmas. He remarked that if we surprise one another, it will be more romantic. However, I discovered the credit card bills he believed he had concealed, which showed purchases of goods I never got from upscale jewelry retailers. The weekend business excursions that I couldn't discover that aligned with any conferences. When I was around, the enigmatic calls from numbers always ended up in voicemail. I'm not like most wives, who would have confronted their husbands right away. Rather, I began obtaining bank statements, monitoring transactions, and constructing a case. He was really providing me with additional proof each time he believed he was hiding anything. I assumed I was unaware of anything as I watched him attempt to gradually deplete our accounts. Once more, "You're working late?" As I sat at my computer, he would inquire, seeming to be concerned. I would respond, "Just catching up on some cases," without bringing up the fact that the case I was working on was his. 3 weeks ago was the tipping moment. My coworker Susan hurried to my desk as I was working late this time. She was holding her phone tightly as if it were about to bite her. And her face was pale. "You must see this, Isla," she continued, her voice trembling. "I discovered something when going through the Thompson case files. It has to do with Brandon." As I gazed at her screen, I was overcome with nausea. It was there. We were investigating a number of questionable transactions associated with Brandon's name. He was being investigated as a person of interest, not as a victim or witness. His business operations were exhibiting the same trends that I had been observing in our personal accounts. He had more in mind than simply abandoning me. He was fleeing something far more significant. As she flipped through the papers, Susan said, "There's more. 3 additional fraud investigations have mentioned him. He chooses successful women, marries them, and then vanishes with their money. New states, different identities, but the same MO prior to his relocation to Milwaukee. The final one took place in Phoenix. The parts began to fit together. It was all part of his pattern, the charm, the secrecy, the sudden interest in our money. I was his next target, not his wife. Furthermore, he was unaware that his most recent target was a specialist in apprehending others who were just like him." I sat in our kitchen until the sun came up that night, reviewing everything from a new perspective. It was all so obvious now, the kind spouse act, the deft manipulation, the way he had gradually attempted to distance himself from my friends and family. It was so ironic that I couldn't help but chuckle. Not because it was humorous. He had chosen the wrong woman to defraud. I prepared for the following 3 weeks. As if nothing were wrong. I would kiss him goodbye every morning. I would record every questionable transaction while listening to his fabrications about his job every night. I transferred our funds, got in touch with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, and collected proof that would aid his former victims as well as safeguard myself. He looked at my face one night and observed, "You seem different lately. Is everything all right?" I grinned as I considered the trap I had built and how his own conceit would ultimately lead to his demise. "I'm just exhausted from work," I said. "This time of year, you are aware of how things may get." He nodded empathetically, presumably believing that I was putting forth a lot of effort to increase my income so he could steal more. He may have noticed my glittering eye, which indicated I knew his plans. If he had been more attentive, Brandon and other con artists, however, never imagine that they will be the ones defrauded. The issue with individuals who earn their livelihood by deceiving others lies in their lack of awareness. They don't anticipate being the ones being played. His ideas began to take shape the morning after Brandon vanished. Just as he had anticipated. Our bank was the first to call. Credit cards were maxed out. There was unusual activity, and there were repeated withdrawal attempts. His sister Kelly, who was furious over the money he had borrowed, gave him the second. The third came from Rachel Clark in Phoenix, who wanted to know whether I knew the whereabouts of her husband. Her spouse. Like a pail of freezing water. The words struck me. "Please tell me what you said." I sat down at my kitchen table and tightened my hold on my phone. "He's still legally my husband. Brandon Murphy," Rachel said, her voice tense with rage. 3 years ago, he vanished with my funds. Since then, I've been following him, despite myself. I grinned. "Actually, you won't believe this, but I've been anticipating your call. His name was Brandon Thompson." Rachel and I exchanged notes throughout the course of the following hour. We shared the same endearing grin, the same tale of the financial advisor, and the same practice of gradually depleting funds before they vanished. However, there was one significant distinction this time. Me. I told her I needed your help to apprehend him. But I have enough proof to bring him down. At that moment, a text message from Brandon buzzed through my phone. "Sorry, may we speak? Can we have a final conversation?" Excellent. Following the pattern I had seen in Rachel's case, He was attempting to maneuver his way into one more opportunity to get any money that remained after the original disappearance. My lawyer was already planning our reaction when I handed him the text. With sparkling eyes, she murmured, "Let's set the trap." I consented to meet Brandon in a downtown coffee shop. He was there when I got there, looking suitably repentant. He was the epitome of a man who had made a grave error. His eyes were red, and his clothing was a little rumpled. He started by grabbing my hand across the table and saying, "I'm so sorry, Isla. I've been dealing with some terrible investments and other stuff." I went into a panic. Playing my part well, I withdrew my hand. "Brandon, how much trouble are you in?" I saw the little glimmer of light in his eyes. He thought someone was deceiving him. "But I have a plan to correct everything. And it will cost around $200. All I need is access to our emergency savings account." I watched him writhe, pretending to think about it. "You mean the emergency money that you attempted to deplete yesterday?" Before he recovered, his expression slumped for a brief moment. "It was an error. I wasn't really thinking. But I swear if you assist me now." "To what end? Do you intend to disappear once more? Or, like you did to Rachel in Phoenix, to remain long enough to deplete my accounts?" He lost the color in his face. Brandon Thompson, or Murphy, or whoever his real name was, appeared truly surprised for the first time since I'd known him. I went on to say, "The funny thing is that I slid a folder across the table. You could have discovered that stealing from a forensic accountant wasn't the best course of action if you had done your homework." At that moment, 2 FBI officers came to our table. I straightened my jacket and got to my feet. "And Brandon, too? You may wish to give a lawyer a call. A decent one." My phone flared up with a call from Susan as the FBI officers carried Brandon away. Her arrival was perfectly timed. "We have him," she said in a victorious tone. "The team has just completed its analysis of the offshore accounts you reported. Brandon is not only a marriage scammer. He has been running an enormous Ponzi scam. Millions of dollars in fraud are at stake." I saw Brandon being loaded into a federal van through the window of the coffee shop. He no longer resembled the self-assured man who believed he had outwitted me. He was little now. "What is the number of victims?" I knew the response would be unpleasant. So I asked. "There have been 23 such marriages in 5 states so far. 12 marriages to prosperous women in the financial industry. Here's the worst part, though. He had a more ambitious strategy. We discovered proof that he was establishing a new investment company. He intended to attract wealthy clientele by using your reputation and qualifications. He would suddenly demonstrate interest in my profession by asking about my cases late at night. And I reflected on those times. He wasn't encouraging. He was gathering information in preparation for his largest fraud to date, which would take advantage of my professional reputation. The irony, I remarked, is that he may have escaped once again if he hadn't been avaricious and had simply continued his typical marital fraud. But he just had to go larger," Susan said. "And that's not even the best part. Do you recall last year when he insisted on joining a country club? It turns out that he was using it to get close to the hedge fund manager Caroline Mitchell. Who was his next target? He was already laying the groundwork for his next vanishing act. I remembered the late-night networking gatherings and the Sunday golf outings. He was preparing his next victim while he was at home playing the loyal spouse. Caroline Mitchell, however, wasn't your typical hedge fund manager. She was one of my best friends. And for months she had been collaborating with me to record Brandon's every action." I said, "Let me guess. Did Caroline allow you to listen in on all of their private chats?" This included every recorded chat in the club lounge, every text message, and every email. In an effort to win her over, he presented us with a comprehensive plan for his entire business. The man essentially built our argument for us. I couldn't contain my laughter. Brandon believed he was the brightest guy in the room and had spent months carefully organizing his departure. In the meantime, everyone he believed he was controlling had been cooperating to create a strong case against him. "Has his sister Kelly gotten back to you? Considering her desperate call this morning?" I inquired. Susan said, "That's another interesting thread. It turns out that she isn't actually his sister. She is complicit. For years, they have been conspiring to operate this hoax. She pretends to be his needy sister in order to justify his urgent need for a loan just before he vanishes. They are picking her up in Chicago as we speak. I reclined in my chair and absorbed everything. Brandon's ignorance was as astounding as the extent of his deceit. His preoccupation with maintaining his lies prevented him from seeing the trap closing in on him. Susan said there was one more item. We discovered who he really was. He is neither Murphy nor Brandon Thompson. Brandon Roberts is here. Additionally, since 2015, he has been wanted in Canada for fraud. As I considered the enormous case file that was awaiting me on my desk, I grinned. Brandon Roberts, welcome to your nightmare. My phone buzzed once again just as I was about to return to the office. It was an SMS from an unidentified number this time. You don't know what's going to happen, but you think you're smart. Examine your email. An email with extensive pictures of myself with my family, my everyday activities, and even pictures taken through my house windows was sent after the message. Anger, not fear, was what sent a shiver down my spine. Brandon had paid someone to monitor me. I called the FBI agent handling Brandon's case after forwarding everything to Susan and my attorney. Morrison, agent? Another participant has entered the game. I'm already on it, she said. We have been monitoring the IP address from which the pictures were obtained. James Foster, Brandon's cellmate from a brief stay in Phoenix, provided the pictures. As Brandon's muscle, he has been intimidating victims who approach too closely in order to reveal the plan. I wondered whether this was the reason Rachel Clark had been silent for so long. Now, where is he? The problem is that we can't find him. Although he's most likely. In mid-sentence, Agent Morrison paused. Wait a moment. One of Brandon's frozen accounts is moving. It's being attempted to be accessed from, throughout your home. My home, where my laptop was left open. I gave Rachel a call right away. Is everything in order over there? She murmured. We have a situation. Kelly is present. She had to have a key. She is attempting to use your computer to access Brandon's accounts. Kelly, the phony sister, who should have been in detention in Chicago. My thoughts whirled over the potential. She had either gotten away or now leave there. Rachel. Kelly isn't working by herself. A crash sounded in the background. And then I heard Rachel take a short inhale. Foster is also here. Too late. My head was clear, but my heart was racing. This was just the type of desperate action I had expected. Do you recall what we talked about? Rachel? The time has come. I heard Rachel's cool voice over the phone. You should check that screen before making a stupid decision. Kelly, knowing exactly what they were observing. I grinned. I didn't simply keep all the evidence. Accounts, or files on my laptop. Agents positioned themselves around the entire home, live streaming everything to the FBI's servers. I heard Rachel remark, "It's over. Gaze outdoors," as FBI officers flooded my home. Sirens blared in the background. Rachel was safe, and Kelly and Foster were taken into jail in a matter of minutes. Agent Morrison was waiting for me when I got home. That was quite a show. She added, "You anticipated that they would attempt this?" At the end, people like Foster, Kelly, and Brandon always become desperate. They can't cope with losing control since they're so accustomed to it. I glanced at my home, which is now the site of a crime. All I had to do was give them the impression that they had one final opportunity to prevail. We may now add witness intimidation and conspiracy charges to their list in light of the threats and the attempted break-in. Agent Morrison grinned. I think your trap was a complete success. I imagined Brandon sitting in his cell, likely still holding out hope that he might negotiate his way out of this. He was unaware that his desperate attempt had just given us all the necessary information to ensure he would never defraud anyone again. I watched Brandon's entire existence fall apart in front of me in the courtroom 2 months later. As the judge handed down his punishment, the self-assured smile vanished, to be replaced by a look of complete despair. Brandon Roberts, you have been sentenced by this court to 25 years in federal prison for many charges of fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and witness intimidation. As they brought him away, he looked at me. His mask briefly came off entirely, allowing me to see the fear below. Love was the least of the man's worries going forward. As he had scribbled, "Never loved you anyway," On a note in my refrigerator. Foster and Kelly fared no better. Despite accepting plea bargains, both would still get lengthy sentences. They exposed activities in 3 nations and presented evidence against Brandon's whole network as part of their agreements. As Brandon's victims, my unexpected sisters in survival, rose one by one to give their impact statements. Rachel sat next to me and squeezed my hand. Though their tales of treachery were similar, each lady concluded on a triumphant note. In addition to justice, we had regained our authority. Agent Morrison smiled as he came up to me after the sentencing. Your expertise would be useful to the Bureau. Have you ever thought of serving as our consultant? I considered all the other Brandons in the world. All the con artists who believed they were too cunning to be apprehended. What do you know? I believe I would enjoy it. I felt lighter as I left the courthouse and entered the brilliant Milwaukee sunshine. But he had only strengthened me. I now had a new goal: to make sure he would be the last con artist to undervalue a lady with a knack for math and a sense of fairness. I appeared at a podium in a crowded conference room at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division in Milwaukee 6 months after Brandon was sentenced. A presentation explaining what they now referred to as the Thompson case, which was neither his nor my true name, was behind me. I had reverted to using my given name since I didn't want to be associated with any of Brandon's false identities. I informed the group full of analysts and agents that the contemporary con artist doesn't carry a gun. They employ technology, deceit, and trust. But if you know where to look, you may find a trail left by them all. The program I had developed with the FBI was already yielding results. 3 significant romance fraud networks had come to light in just the last month. Rachel's expertise helped us learn how these predators selected their victims, making her one of our most useful consultants. I discovered a message from Susan on my phone after the session. Brandon has found another of his victims in Vancouver. She had lost everything, including her home, assets, and company, in contrast to the rest of us. However, we may assist her in getting back the stolen item this time. The forensic team had finally decrypted Brandon's encrypted data, revealing accounts he had hidden worldwide. I recalled how he had attempted to shatter me with 5 hurtful words on the Sunday morning when I had discovered his message. Rather, he had gifted me the opportunity to assist others in resisting those who are similar to him. Sitting on my balcony that night, I marveled at the irony of my new apartment's view of Lake Michigan. After spending his whole life stealing from strong women, Brandon had unintentionally produced something strong. A network of warriors who had survived and were committed to eliminating males just like him. Surviving isn't always the greatest form of retaliation, sometimes thriving is.